don't know anything about romantic comedies, the first thing you should know is that there are going to be a lot of things that feel contrived and don't happen in real life the way they do in the movie. I think there's definitely some things that are contrived in this movie. And the fact that they don't happen the way they would in real life is part of the fun. So, with that, let's talk about Romancing the Stone. Let's do it. Here's another movie directed by the great Robert Zemeckis. I'm surprised I didn't clock that he directed this. He had his hands in a lot of different pots, just from the breadth and depth, the range of movies he's directed, from everything from Back to the Future, which would come out a year after this movie. You got the Forrest Gump movie, you got Flight, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Castaway. He's had his hands in a lot of different types of flavors and stuff, and it's cool to see. It's cool to find he directed this movie, especially coming off of the previous. I think I reviewed Contact, which he also directed. The man just has quite a range. This movie stars Michael Douglas, Kathleen Turner, who, by the way, I'll get to the pairing. I think it's one of the more epic pairings in a romantic comedy adventure story that you'll see around. In fact, it's a pairing so good that it yielded a sequel, Jewel of the Nile. That one I'm more familiar with. I'd seen ads for both movies on TV as a kid. If you remember KICU TV 36, that was a channel that showed a lot of things on reruns, like Fresh Prince and other shows. It showed a lot of also movies of the week. They would show older movies. They would show like a range of TV movies and tons of things. One of those movies was The Punisher, the Dolph Lundgren version. Punisher. You had guys, movies like a lot of Chuck Norris movies, Charles Bronson movies, and then of course you had stuff like this that would show. And I'd never really watched them. They were on in the background sometimes, but I just never really clocked it to my young mind to watch it. I wanted something more adventure-y, I guess, at that stage, which I don't know why this wouldn't have been in the wheelhouse, because it's the kind of movie that I think that I don't know that I would appreciate it in the same way though as a kid. But having seen it now as a grown-up, I can see why it's a lot of people's one of their favorite movies from that time period. So the movie is about a romance adventure writer, played by Kathleen Turner, who gets wrapped up in this adventure where she has to go and save her sister, who has been captured by bad guys who are after some treasure. They're after a map that can lead to a treasure. And so in an effort to save her sister, she has to go upon this adventure where she meets Jack, played by Michael Douglas, and the two of them have to embark on the journey together. Along the way, they fall in love and end up having to try to solve the puzzle, solve the mystery of the treasure. Right from the top, this feels like Indiana Jones with a more romance slant. Indiana Jones has elements of romantic things in it, but Indiana Jones plays more like James Bond in that way, where the romance elements are there, but they're really the backdrop of the story. That's just because you have to have a woman in the picture, and Bond has to try to negotiate methods of seduction and stuff with her, and vice versa. Here, the romance takes a little bit of a front seat. This is actually the forefront of the movie. The adventure is this other addition to it. The adventure is like the spice, which is fun to think about when you consider the idea of romance in general, and how the very act of romancing and the experience of being romanced is in itself an adventure. So to add an actual jet-setting adventure to that is just it's further flavoring. It's like you just take something that's real and dramatize it, and it feels like a whirlwind of emotions and things, which is a lot like what falling in love is. And so it's actually it's fun to see these two people embark on this ride together, and it is a ride. This movie ultimately is fun, and the chemistry between the two leads is real, which is what you want. You want it to feel organic, and it's the kind of situation where it wouldn't matter what situation you put them in. You could have it doesn't have to be this movie. It could be you could put these two characters in any scenario. They could be in a straight action movie. They could be in a more dramatic situation. They could be in a full-on comedy. Whatever the genre is, it's one of those ones where if they're together, the chemistry is strong enough to hold them across the whatever genre, whatever situations they find themselves in. And as audience members, is you want to see that. There's a reason I think it was so popular. The movie was so popular that it yielded a sequel. I feel like you probably could have gotten at least one or two other sequels out of the out of the game. It reminds me actually a little bit of, I don't know if any of you know the Thin Man movie series. It's an old series from the 1930s and into the 1940s, where it's basically it's a married couple who they solve murder mysteries together. And the husband was a former cop who retired and was trying to stay out of the game, but circumstances keep putting him in the path of the mystery, and he and his wife have to solve these murder mysteries. There's about four of them, I think, four or five. Can't remember and they range from the 1930s into the 1940s. And the chemistry between I'd seen the first one. The chemistry between the two leads is just magnetic. You just feel like they have a great working relationship. They're great partners. They're equals in that way, in some ways. But because the movies are in the 1930s and 40s, there is a slight edge to the husband, because this is it was a man's world, and there's only so many spaces that a woman can occupy and feel like she has just as much agency or close to as much agency as her male counterpart. But the Thin Man movies were, I think, a good example of great chemistry between two leads who are on this adventure together. And similarly, you have that with Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner. The sparks just fly immediately, and you want to see them together. You want to see them bounce ideas off each other. You want to see them try to figure out how to get through whatever the situation is together. And I think they should be in the conversation for one of the stronger film pairings. You think of something like Basic Instinct, for instance, with Michael Douglas and Sharon Stone. That is a legendary pairing as well. It's a shame they didn't do more movies together. But that kind of situation is like, and in some ways, maybe it's a good thing, because it's so electric. You don't want to ruin the sort of juice that comes with that. But there are great pairings. Like there are other great pairings like Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore. They've worked on at least 3 movies together. There's something to that. Again, and they're in various different scenarios. That's how good their chemistry is. Things like that. If you picture pairings like that, I think Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner have a similar energy about them. Additionally, if you look at them, they're gorgeous. Michael Douglas is handsome as all get out. Kathleen Turner is smoldering. She's beautiful. And when they really start getting into the mix of the adventure, they're in Colombia where the weather is warmer, so it's hotter, which means they're sweaty, and they have there's some glow about them, and there's something that's really magnetic about watching them on screen together. Forget the rest of the movie. If you just watch them, you might be in for a treat. Along those lines, the supporting cast is pretty strong. Danny DeVito adds some comic relief, and Zach Norman plays his cousin. They play well off of each other as family members who are bumbling through the situation on the opposite side, on the opposition side, also trying to get their hands on the map to find the treasure. And so it's good to have them sort of on the side, adding further energy to the proceedings. Alfonso Arau plays one of my favorite comic relief characters. He's like a drug dealer, or at least an implied drug dealer, who is a fan of Joan, who's Kathleen Turner's character, who writes these romance novels. It's funny to have this guy who's like this hardened, rough and tough criminal, but he also clearly has a soft side if he's a fan of romance novels. So it's just a funny, the contrast like that is pretty hilarious. You know, you also have Manuel Ojeda, who is the commanding officer, commanding, military dude, who's very scary, very intimidating, and he's suitable for this kind of, he's not quite mustache twirling. He's much more grounded than that, but I think there's a hint of how he plays the character that lends itself to the inherent humor in what's happening. A lot of the stuff that's happening is kind of implausible, and that's kind of the point. It's not supposed to be 100% believable because it's this fun, whimsical adventure story. So you need a villain that is serious and feels threatening enough that you're worried about our characters, but also not so serious that it undercuts the comedy thread in the movie. I think he plays the role suitable enough to fit that. And then just as an aside, one of my favorite sort of additional characters is in the mix, Mary Ellen Trainor. I have a soft spot for her just because I remember her from the Lethal Weapon movies. She plays the cop psychiatrist, cop therapist, who's been in all 4 Lethal Weapon movies. She was also, which is a fun fact, I didn't know this, I discovered this, that she plays the same news anchor in Die Hard as she does in a 1991 film called Ricochet, which is cool. I like it to find, it reminds me of, that's this odd thing about characters who find their way into other stories across different time. This is an extreme example, but if you think of a character like John Munch most people know him from Law & Order SVU, but probably a lot of people don't remember, may not be old enough to remember that John Munch came from a cop TV show called Homicide. And when that show went off the air, somehow Richard Belzer, who was the actor who played John Munch, figured out a way to get himself into all these other shows and all these different things. He was, became obviously Detective John Munch in Law & Order SVU, but he was on cartoon things. He was on The Simpsons. He was on all these different shows as the same character. Obviously, this is different from Mary Ellen Trainor, but it's cool that in 2 different movies across, a 5-year span-ish, she was the same character. But what I like about it is that that thread is that both of those stories take place in LA. Die Hard takes place in LA, and Ricochet also takes place in LA. So it makes sense that she's the local news anchor of that area. So she would be she might be the one on the scene for both of those movies. If you look at what the world is, so that's kind of cool. Just another sort of another aside about this movie is that it deals with the main character is a romance writer. She's an adventure writer. She writes these adventures, and then she ends up getting caught up in one that she then has to live, which becomes fuel for the next book she writes. And that's me as a writer. Again, as a kid, I wouldn't have appreciated that, but as a writer and author myself, that is endlessly fascinating to me because when writing stories, it feels like you're living them anyway because you have to sort of put yourself into the mindset of these characters, put yourself into the world that you're building. And for Joan, she is doing that all the time, writing these books. And the fact that she gets to go out and do it for real and then turn it into something else is a lot like what you do when you're creating stuff. You write your stuff and then you go out into the world and have your life experiences, and those things they come back into your work and fuel that stuff. That's just a sort of other little nugget that helped me enjoy the movie. I already enjoyed it just as an audience member because it was fun and it was whimsical. It reminded me a lot of those movies from that time period, like Hook. Stuff like Dick Tracy, Labyrinth, with a less fantasy slant, but there is something fantastical about this movie too. It's a fantasy in that way. It may not be hardcore fantasy, like high fantasy, like Lord of the Rings, but the idea that you can go on this adventure, get whisked away, fall in love, find this treasure, and do all these things. There's something fantastical, phantasmic about that. And that's part of the fun of a movie like this. And I would imagine part of the fun of writing something like this. And if you're Joan, she's having some kind of fun writing these adventures. That just seemed like another way for me to connect to it. This is a classic 80s movie. And not really much else to say. If you're curious about it and you haven't seen it, I recommend giving it a watch. If for no other reason, for sure, just watch Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner play off each other. Watch the sparks between those two. It's a really good masterclass in the alchemy of actor pairings. You know when the chemistry is right. You can feel when it feels like it's forced, like it isn't there naturally, and this is not the case here. It's very natural here. It feels like you could imagine they didn't have to do too much work to make it work between them. Again, why would you do another movie with the person if you didn't feel like that? So at some point down the line, I want to check out Jewel of the Nile and see how that one measures up. I understand it's probably not as strong as this one, but I would imagine it was still successful in some regard, even if it didn't reach the same heights. But that's for another time. As always, thank you for taking the time to hang out and listen to me talk about this movie. Got to get out of here, but come on back. I'll see you when we talk about the next movie. So I got to run, but take it easy, take care, and I'll catch you later.